Yeah.
Have you ever had one of those really profound encounters, maybe with a new friend or a mentor or even a romantic partner, where the connection just feels immediate, almost, well, inexplicable, like you've known them before? Or maybe time just seems to stop for a moment. It feels like more than just coincidence.
Absolutely. And for Carl Jung, who, as you know, spent his entire life exploring the invisible architecture of the human soul, well, these kinds of impactful meetings are anything but random. He actually had a name for this phenomenon: synchronicity.
Synchronicity, right?
Yeah, it's this idea of a meaningful alignment between something happening outside you, an external event, and your own internal unconscious movements. It's not cause and effect in the usual sense, but there's this profound significance, a connection that feels deep, beyond words sometimes. Okay, so that's exactly what we want to explore today. Our mission, really, is to take a deep dive into Jung's pretty revolutionary insights about why certain people enter our lives. We'll unpack synchronicity, definitely, but also look at this idea of projection and the wisdom of intuition. The goal is to see how Jung thought every relationship, whether it's brief or lasts a lifetime, can act as a kind of mirror, guiding us perhaps toward wholeness and ultimately a clearer understanding of genuine, healthy love. So let's start right there with that really powerful feeling. You meet someone new, but somehow they feel incredibly familiar, almost mysterious even. And you can't help but ask yourself, why this person and why now? And like you said, this isn't just about romance, is it? It could be any connection that really leaves a mark.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is Jung's core belief here. He didn't really see randomness in these moments. He basically asserted that every significant person who enters your life reflects some part of your own soul. Maybe a part you haven't recognized yet, or perhaps one you're actively trying to keep hidden or forget.
So they aren't coming to complete us, like in the movies.
Not in Jung's view, no. They don't arrive to complete you, but more to clarify something within you. They're not there to save you necessarily, but maybe to illuminate a path or a pattern. And crucially, they don't always come to stay. Sometimes their purpose is just to awaken something inside you.
That sense of immediate recognition you mentioned, like someone just gets you, the real you, without any effort. Jung seems to suggest this isn't just, comfort. It's like a moment where hidden parts of yourself are mirrored back and accepted.
Yes, precisely.
So it's less about finding a missing piece out there and maybe more about rediscovering a forgotten part of yourself through them. You feel seen, and you don't have to put on a performance or force them to accept you. They just do.
But that brings up a really important point Jung made, a kind of caution. While these encounters feel profound, these individuals aren't always meant to stay forever. That can be hard to accept. Sometimes a connection is forged, very specifically to guide you through a particular chapter, a segment of your path you just couldn't navigate alone at that time. So the real significance isn't whether they remain in your life indefinitely. It's about what part of yourself you discovered or rediscovered through that encounter. Did you find a wound that needed tending? Or maybe a hidden talent, a light you hadn't dared to live out? If you were brave enough to really look in that mirror they held up and accept what you saw, well, then maybe that person fulfilled their role.
That connects to another really powerful statement Jung made. We do not meet others, we meet ourselves through others. That's not just clever wordplay, is it? It sounds like he's saying every connection we make externally is, at its core, an interaction with parts of ourselves we haven't fully integrated.
Precisely. That's the essence of what he called projection. It's this psychological phenomenon where unconscious parts of us, especially the bits we haven't accepted or, made peace with, get sort of externalized. We inadvertently assign these qualities or feelings onto other people. So we end up not seeing them as they truly are, but through this distorted lens created by our own wounds, expectations, maybe even our deepest fears. It's our unintegrated stuff coloring how we see the world and the people in it.
Wow. So if every interaction is really a reflection, then the big insight isn't just what we see in others, but how that shifts the questions we should be asking ourselves.
Right. Like you gave the example, someone might make you feel incredibly warm, not because of something specific they did, but because they accidentally tap into some old memory of unconditional love within you.
Exactly. Or the opposite. Or the opposite. Someone triggers intense irritation. And it's not really about their actions, but because they remind you, uncomfortably, of a part of yourself you really don't want to look at. So every reaction, whether it's like instant infatuation or immediate resistance, is actually a clue pointing back to your own inner landscape.
And Jung famously said, this is such a crucial quote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will continue to direct your life and you will call it destiny." 2. So think about those recurring relationship patterns we all see or experience, the cycles of attraction, maybe intense connection that hurt, distance, disappointment, repeat. Jung would say that's not just bad luck, it's your unconscious mind, subtly recreating familiar scenarios to essentially confirm hidden beliefs you hold about yourself or relationships. For instance, if deep down you carry a core fear of abandonment, you might find yourself repeatedly drawn to partners who keep you, well, just close enough to maintain hope, but always distant enough to keep that wound activated. Painfully familiar.
Okay, I can see how incredibly powerful that perspective is, but
Yeah.
I wonder, for some people listening, could this sound a bit like blaming the victim or shifting all responsibility inward? How do we make sure this idea is understood not as self-blame, but genuinely as empowerment, as self-awareness? It's not about being the problem, right? But recognizing how our internal world attracts certain experiences.
That's a critical distinction. It's absolutely about personal agency, not blame. Jung wasn't about blame, he was about consciousness. He believed that fundamentally every external connection originates from the relationship you cultivate with yourself. So if you don't truly feel worthy of love deep down, you'll likely find yourself in situations where you have to constantly fight for affection or approval. If you haven't learned to truly choose yourself, to prioritize your own well-being, you might find yourself sacrificing your authenticity just to keep a connection going, even if it drains you day after day. In this view, others act almost like signposts. They're not pointing the way forward necessarily, but pointing the way back to yourself. The shift happens when you start observing these patterns instead of just reacting to them. When you start identifying the underlying belief instead of just repeating the experience, that's when you begin stepping out of the unconscious's invisible grip.
That naturally leads us to think about another kind of knowing, doesn't it? That feeling that goes beyond words or logical reasoning. It's that really depth sense of either unease or maybe profound safety you get when you meet someone new, before you even know anything concrete about them. You haven't talked much, you don't have data points, but there's just this quiet certainty in your gut.
Yes, intuition.
Yeah.
Jung saw intuition not just as a hunch, but as a form of, ancient wisdom, a language of the subconscious, a kind of knowing that doesn't require external proof. He considered it a sacred capacity, actually, directly connected to what he called the collective unconscious, that universal shared reservoir of human experience, symbols, and archetypes. It's like tapping into a vast field of information that lies beyond the grasp of our everyday rational mind. And it often manifests subtly. It's not usually loud or demanding, more like a subtle tremor in the soul, a gentle ways, just quietly resonating within you.
The challenge, though, is that we often live so externally, right? We're so focused on the outside world that we can neglect this powerful inner voice. We're taught to prioritize logic, data, proof. We forget that feeling is often our first, most primal instinct. Like an infant feels its mother's presence long before it can name her mother, or how animals seem to sense danger well before they can see or hear it. Our busy, noisy modern lives can make it really hard to tune into that quiet signal.
Absolutely. So the key question becomes, how do you discern true intuition from other feelings? It's really important to note, true intuition isn't usually experienced as agitation or anxiety or a strong, overwhelming emotion that feels like it's born from fear or an activated ego defense. It's typically quieter than that. Persistent, yes, but quiet, like a gentle, steady wave, not a raging storm. If an emotion makes you feel frantic or out of control, Jung would likely suggest that's probably an ego reaction, maybe based on past hurts, not pure intuition. He suggested listening for it in moments of stillness, when you can quiet the mental chatter and sincerely ask yourself, okay, what is truly happening here beneath the surface? He believed that this inner voice, if listened to patiently, will often reveal whether a connection stems from genuine synchronicity, or maybe from underlying fear, or perhaps even from an ego illusion we've constructed.
That brings us perfectly to this idea of the ego illusion. It's like a subtle trap the mind can set, isn't it? Its incredible ability to convince us that what we desire is actually what's real, especially when it comes to relationships. When you're deeply yearning for love or belonging or just to feel seen, it seems like anyone who happens to touch on those specific desires can suddenly appear ideal in your mind's eye, even if, objectively, they might not be a good fit at all.
Precisely. Jung talked quite a bit about this ego illusion. It's where you stop seeing the actual person standing in front of you, and instead you see a reflection of your own unaddressed needs and desires. Your ego, which is primarily driven by its need for recognition, validation, and gratification, essentially creates an image. It projects this idealized image onto the other person and then clings to it, sometimes desperately, convincing itself that this is destiny, this is the one. This is why Jung made that sharp distinction. You don't fall in love, you fall into an image of love. He suggested that much of what we often perceive as falling in love is actually a subconscious reenactment of old patterns, old fears, unresolved childhood needs, powerful memories, and, yeah, illusions. We're often loving the image we desperately need, not necessarily the person who is actually there.
Okay, so that distinction is critical. How can we learn to differentiate? What are some of the key signs that might help us tell a genuine soul level connection apart from one of these ego illusions?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Well, Jung offered some pointers. A true resonant connection tends to bring with it a sense of underlying peace. Even when there are challenges or disagreements, there's a fundamental feeling of centeredness. It doesn't typically cause chronic disorientation or make you feel like you're losing yourself. You feel more rooted, more yourself, actually, in their presence. Even if it's challenging, you feel secure at the core. An illusion, on the other hand, often comes with intense excitement, absolutely, maybe even euphoria, but is usually accompanied by a kind of lurking, subtle anxiety. A too good to be true feeling, maybe. Can make you feel like you're flying high, but there's always this nagging uncertainty about whether you're actually falling. And importantly, an illusion often subtly forces you into a position where you feel you have to constantly prove your worth. You find yourself trying too hard, being overly interesting, or carefully curating your personality. You end up sacrificing your authenticity to maintain an image you think they desire.
And these illusions, as you mentioned, can act like these sort of unconscious contracts between two people's unhealed parts. Maybe one person needs constant admiration, the other needs rescuing. One fears abandonment, the other fears being smothered. And these needs kind of latch onto each other and call it love. What happens if we stay stuck in these illusions long term?
Well, Jung warned that maintaining these illusions leads to what he called psychological fragmentation. It's quite serious. You start denying crucial parts of yourself, your real feelings, your needs, your boundaries, just to keep the illusion and the connection alive. This creates internal conflict, like cracks forming in your inner structure. It's deeply detrimental to your sense of self. So it really becomes vital to practice self-reflection. Ask yourself honestly, does this relationship generally make me feel light, expansive, more myself? Or does it leave me feeling subtly tense, constricted, anxious? Am I truly being myself around this person, or am I performing a version they seem to want? Do I genuinely love them with all their imperfections, or am I more in love with the feeling I project onto them, the way they make me feel about myself? Am I staying in this connection out of genuine resonance and shared growth, or is it more about a fear of being alone or maybe repeating a familiar pattern? Because as Jung might say, true love, while never perfect, will never fundamentally demand that you deny your own soul.
That leads beautifully into what feels like a really profound truth, one that certainly challenges a lot of common cultural narratives. True love doesn't come to fill a void, but arrives when you are already feeling full. This idea directly confronts that pervasive notion of searching for your missing half, doesn't it? Which Jung apparently considered one of the ego's biggest illusions, because ultimately, no one else can complete you but yourself.
Exactly. And this brings us right to the heart of Jung's concept of individuation. He considered this the greatest, most important task of human life. It's essentially an inward journey, a lifelong process of becoming more fully and consciously yourself. It means integrating all the parts your light and your shadow, your strengths and your vulnerabilities, the ego and the deeper soul, all those aspects that might have been rejected, ignored, or unseen, perhaps since childhood. When you consciously embark on this path of individuation, your focus shifts. You stop looking for others to heal you or complete you. And instead, you begin to share the wholeness, the centeredness that you started to cultivate within yourself. See, relationships built on a sense of lack, on needing something from the other person, always carry this kind of invisible pressure. Pressure to make them happy, pressure to be good enough, pressure to keep them from leaving. And in meeting those pressures, you subtly, often unconsciously, lose pieces of yourself along the way. Jung was quite clear. You can only truly love others to the extent that you have learned to love and accept yourself.
So, just to clarify, this healing or individuation, it isn't about reaching some state of perfection, right? No flaws, no issues. What did Jung really mean by becoming whole or healed in this context?
Oh, absolutely not perfection. That's another illusion. Healing in the Jungian sense is much more about learning to simply be with yourself honestly and compassionately without constantly trying to escape or avoid the uncomfortable bits. It means accepting those parts of you that you might have forgotten or pushed away. It means listening to and maybe reparenting your inner child who might still carry fears of rejection or not being good enough. It means having the courage to embrace the anger you suppressed or the vulnerability you hid. It's about being able to look yourself in the mirror, shadows and all, and declare your inherent worth, independent of anyone else's validation. It's that feeling of, okay, I don't need anyone else to prove my value anymore because I recognize it's already fundamentally within me.
And when someone starts living more from that place, that sense of self-sufficiency and inner fullness, how did Jung see that shifting the kind of love they attract or are attracted to?
The whole dynamic changes. Love starts to arrive without that desperate edge, without the need to possess or control. It becomes freer, lighter, clearer, somehow. You tend to attract partners who are vibrating on a similar frequency, individuals who are also engaged in their own journey of growth and are seeking mutual enrichment, not just completion or rescue. Jung actually stated something to the effect that meeting the right person isn't the real miracle. The miracle is developing the inner clarity to recognize them when they do appear. And, just as importantly, cultivating the courage to release connections or patterns that no longer serve your genuine growth, even if they feel familiar or safe. This isn't something that just happens overnight, of course. It's the natural outcome of that dedicated inward journey.
You've consistently highlighted how Jung saw other people acting as mirrors for us. What then would you say is maybe the most surprising or perhaps counterintuitive aspect of how these mirrors actually clarify our own path to healing? Because it sounds like truly suitable partners aren't necessarily the ones who just make us feel comfortable all the time.
Exactly that. That's perhaps the most challenging part for many people to grasp. People aren't really meant to be saviors in the way we often think. They function more as clarifiers. They clarify where you still need healing by inevitably activating both your light, your potential, your joy, and your shadow, your fears, your wounds, your projections. So a truly suitable partner, in this Jungian view, isn't someone who just constantly coddles your ego or tells you what you want to hear. Instead, they might gently, or sometimes not so gently, challenge you to become your true self. They hold up that mirror, not to judge you, but to allow you to see yourself more authentically, without the masks, without the learned roles, without the memorized lines you use to navigate the world. A genuine growth-oriented relationship isn't always smooth sailing. Sometimes it involves friction, difficult conversations, facing uncomfortable truths. But if you can stay present through those challenges, you might realize they aren't intentionally hurting you. They are perhaps inadvertently revealing a wound that was already there, waiting to be healed.
Okay, so connecting all these threads, synchronicity, projection, intuition, individuation, if we bring it back to the bigger picture, how would Jung ultimately define healthy love, especially in contrast to those intense but often damaging ego illusions we talked about earlier?
Healthy love, from a Jungian perspective, isn't primarily defined by that dramatic Hollywood-style intensity, the kind that often burns out quickly. It's characterized more as a kind of nurturing stream, steady, supportive, life-giving. It doesn't fundamentally disorient you or make you lose your sense of self. It doesn't involve constant games, manipulation, or making you feel like you have to shrink yourself to fit. Instead, it creates a space where you can breathe, where you can be truly authentically yourself, flaws and all, without constant fear of judgment or abandonment, where you can engage in honest dialogue even during conflict because there's an underlying trust. Even the silences aren't scary or filled with tension because they're understood as moments of respect or contemplation. Healthy love ultimately is characterized by clarity, a sense of security, even amidst life's uncertainties, and a quiet, steady confidence that emerges naturally when two people are sharing from a place of inner fullness, rather than desperately seeking to be filled by the other.
Wow, what a truly fascinating journey we've taken today, diving into Carl Jung's perspective, learning to see relationships not just as external connections, but as these incredibly profound mirrors reflecting our own inner world.
It really shifts things, doesn't it? And perhaps to leave you, our listeners, with one final provocative thought to mull over, something Jung might subtly nudge us towards. Instead of constantly asking, how do I know if they're the right person for me? Maybe the more potent, transformative question Jung invites us to ask is, have I yet truly become the right person for myself?
That's a powerful reframing indeed. It really underscores everything we've discussed, that before you can truly recognize genuine resonance with another person, you first need the inner clarity to distinguish that resonance from your own ego's desires, projections, and fears. And that clarity, as we've explored, doesn't just magically appear. It comes from doing the inner work, listening deeply to yourself, having the courage to release what no longer serves your soul's journey, and unconsciously embracing your own inherent completeness.
And that really is the profound shift Jung pointed towards. When you start to embody that sense of self-wholeness, when you operate from that centered place, external relationships tend to naturally align in a healthier way. You won't feel the need to strive so hard, to convince, to cling, or to control. The right people, when they appear, won't feel overwhelming or desperately needed. Instead, they'll likely bring a sense of quiet stability, a peaceful resonance to your heart, precisely because you no longer need them to complete you. You are already finding that completeness within. True love then becomes less of a frantic search and more of a natural, beautiful continuation of the healing and integration process that has already begun within you.